Hello and welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. The headlines this hour. An Israeli civilian, a man in his 30s, killed in the latest Hezbollah rocket attack on the north. An EU official and the head of Hamas attend the swearing-in of Iran's new president in Tehran. And France follows Israel and the United States in recognising Moroccan sovereignty over the disputed Western Sahara region in a move that's likely to anger Algeria. A man in his 30s has been killed in the latest missile attack on northern Israel by the Lebanese-based Iranian proxy Hezbollah. The man, who has not been named, was in Kibbutz HaGoshrim, where the rocket struck. Tensions between Israel and Lebanon are at their highest in months, following a Hezbollah attack on Sunday, which killed 12 Jewish children in the Golan Heights. Well, our Zach Anders is up in northern Israel for us now. Zach, what more do we know about this latest attack?
Well, I24 News can't confirm that this was an attack with 10 rockets inside the barrage. The IDF says most intercepted, but it's this one that impacted. We still don't know for certain if this was bits of the intercepted rocket as it was falling or if it was a direct hit. Either way, MDA says that as they arrived on scene, they found a man in his 30s with severe shrapnel wounds. They attempted to resuscitate him, but were unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead on scene. This is a civilian, bringing the civilian death toll here in the north to 25 now. Of course, that number has jumped up considerably in the last week after the 12 Druze children were killed in Majd al-Shams that I'm looking at in the direction of the Golan Heights, where also a large fire is burning here in the valley of the Galilee as a result of that attack that killed the man in his 30s. This fire, I'm told, has 6 different crews from a local Galilee and Golan brigades that are actively trying to combat this, but it's in some brush and into the trees. The fire crews tell me that they're working to get it under control, but because of the high winds, as you can probably tell, it's very difficult to be able to address in these conditions, although the temperature is coming down, so this fire shouldn't be burning as hot as the sun sets, but potentially with this wind continuing throughout the evening, could be a tough one to combat. And this isn't, of course, the only attack that has happened today. 6 attacks Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for, including the attack that killed this civilian. What we're watching for tonight, again, is an expected Israeli response that looms here. What no one knows for certain outside of obviously the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister is what that response could look like. But we're seeing already the rhetoric from Hezbollah as they say, no matter what, we will counter and retaliate any Israeli aggression. A Hezbollah source telling Al Jazeera that they're prepared to hit positions in Haifa and Ramat David Air Base, listing these targets out loud today, this source to Al Jazeera. So again, tensions, we've been up here for months, and these tensions ebb and flow, but the last few days have certainly felt like at any moment this could erupt.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Anders there with the very latest from the north of Israel. Well, as you heard there, Israel is expected to respond to Hezbollah, and there are concerns of a wider war. World leaders are urging Israel to act with restraint, while others are calling on their citizens to leave Lebanon immediately.
I believe that you asked whether or not a fight was between Israel and Lebanon, or Israel and Lebanon Hezbollah, is inevitable, or imminent, excuse me. I don't believe that, while we've seen a lot of activity on Israel's northern border, we remain concerned about the potential of this escalating into a full-blown fight. I don't believe that a fight is inevitable. I think that we'd like to see things resolved in a diplomatic fashion.
Very, very concerned about what is happening in Lebanon because of the risk of a regional escalation, just as it seemed that there might be some glimmer of hope. And this is also an element that must be evaluated. Every time we seem to be a little closer to the hypothesis of a ceasefire, something happens. It means that there are several, let's say, regional players who aim for an escalation and who we say always aim to force Israel to react. I say this also to invite Israel not to fall into this trap.
The situation on the de facto border between Lebanon and Israel is very concerning. We urge all parties to act with caution. The UK condemns the strike in the Golan Heights that has tragically claimed the lives of 12 people. Hezbollah must cease their attacks and their destabilising activity.
All right, some of the international reaction there. Well, with me in the studio this hour, Shireen Grossman is a member of Forum Dvorah, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security, and she's the former head of regional affairs at the Israel National Security Council. Good to have you with us, Shiri. And joining us from the US, David Dowd is a Hezbollah and Lebanon senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies, the FDD. Welcome to you, David, as well. So, Shiri, I'll start with you. Another civilian murdered by Hezbollah today, as we heard Zach reporting there. That brings the number to 25. There is, I should say, some speculation that Israel may respond as early as tonight. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't want to say the sooner the better. I want to say the more accurate, the more precise the response, the better. An effective response that I personally believe not only target Hezbollah military assets, but also some civilian assets, banks, gasoline stations, infrastructure that helps them attack Israel.
So you're talking about cyber attacks?
Everything's on the table. As long as it's Hezbollah, I'm not with the camp that says we should attack Lebanese infrastructure, Lebanese state. I don't think the Lebanese state exists. And we should exaggerate more, on the Lebanese state and then bring us international pressure in return to stop the war. So if someone wants to stop this escalation very fast, it could argue that we should attack Lebanese infrastructure. But I want to, I watched just a clip that you showed about the international response, and I just can't believe this is the response we get from the West. This is a war that Hezbollah started. We saw, I'm still traumatized by the scenes of Saturday night, very traumatized. I've seen horrible pictures of children dead. We've seen reports about family members, fathers collecting parts of their children's bodies after we've seen, and just this automatic response that let's not get into this escalation without a clear moral stand about what's right, what's wrong.
The difference between a state and a terrorist group.
Iran, it's an automatic response. They click on a button and they just issue it, and it's just so sad to see.
Israel shouldn't overreact. All right, David Dowd. Hezbollah and Lebanon clearly aware that Israel is preparing to respond, and that response is inevitable. They don't seem to be dialing down the rhetoric at all, though. We heard very belligerent rhetoric from Hezbollah once again today.
Thank you for having me on. That's to be expected from Hezbollah. Hezbollah cannot appear to look weak. I think they've got themselves in a bind now. They know there's going to be a painful Israeli response to the murder of the 12 children in Masjid al-Shams, but they've also promised to continue attacking Israel until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. That has not been achieved, and therefore Hezbollah has to continue attacking. And with each attack, they increase the risk of a more painful Israeli response. Today, there was an Israeli civilian who was killed in the north. Again, this seems to be something similar to how the attack happened in Masjid al-Shams. There was an intended target they were intended to target IDF positions in Bet Hillel. It seems like a rocket overshot and killed someone in Abu Shrim. This is similar to what happened in Masjid al-Shams. There was always this possibility with every attack that Hezbollah conducts, especially with imprecise weapons. But they've caught themselves. They're stuck. So now they have to appear strong. They have to appear to their base that they're able to withstand whatever the Israeli response is, and so that explains the continued heated rhetoric. And
what about the response from the Druze community inside Lebanon? Is Hezbollah at all sensitive to their concerns and their anger about what happened on Saturday?
There's mutual sensitivity. I mean, if we see the political leaders of the Druze community and the spiritual leader of the Druze community, the Sheikh Al-Aql, was today interviewed on Al Jadid. And they all adopted the Hezbollah line on the attack in Majd al-Shams, hook, line, and sinker. Today, the spiritual leader of the Druze was asked by Al Jadid TV if Israel was blaming Hezbollah for the attack in Majd al-Shams to create fissures and discord between the Druze and the Shiites in Lebanon, and he agreed with that assessment, that this was some kind of Israeli conspiracy. So Hezbollah is sensitive to not rile them up. They're also sensitive to the strength that Hezbollah wields, both in terms of its arms and the massive public support it wields among Lebanon's Shiites, who are probably Lebanon's largest demographic group.
And while we're talking, David, let's bring up the footage which was released today. This is new footage of the attack on Majd al-Shams over the weekend, which once again, completely blows apart Hezbollah's claim that it didn't fire the missiles that killed those children. There we go. We can see that is new footage that just came out today. And David, just while I've got you, what are your thoughts on the international response so far? We seem to be hearing more of the same. Israel has the right to defend itself, but Israel must keep that response proportionate.
I will add one thing on Hezbollah's denials. They still have on their Telegram channel them claiming an attack that occurred around the time of the impact in Majd al-Shams with the type of weapon and a few kilometers away. So this was a weapon that overshot and hit Majd al-Shams. In terms of the international reaction, I think it's born out of this obsessive need, this fetishization of quiet for the sake of quiet, and this misguided idea that you can keep the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah contained in some way, be it now in this current state of war of attrition that it's been in since Hezbollah launched its attacks on October 8th, or if there's a deceptive quiet on the border, similar to what existed prior to October 8th, the idea that somehow if you just buy quiet, or somehow if you do certain things and prevent escalation, that this war between Israel and Hezbollah that is going through phases, sometimes it's an up phase, sometimes it's a down phase, that this will remain contained indefinitely. And that is, I think, a very short-sighted and misguided view.
David Dowd at the FDD, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Hezbollah's number 2 was among the representatives of Iranian-backed terrorist groups in Tehran today for the swearing-in of the new president. The Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was also there. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has this report.
The red carpet was rolled out as world dignitaries arrived in Tehran on Tuesday for the inauguration ceremony of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian.
I, as the president, in front of the Holy Quran and the people of Iran, swear to Almighty God to be the guardian of the official religion and the Islamic Republic.
2 days after receiving the formal endorsement from Iran's supreme leader, the former heart surgeon was sworn in as the 9th president of the Islamic Republic.
The focus of our convergence will be to adhere to the constitution, the vision, and the general policies of the supreme leader.
Similar to his predecessor, the festive ceremony only drew B-list world leaders, like the heads of state of Armenia and Tajikistan. Representing the European Union was its chief nuclear negotiator, Enrique Mora. But that didn't keep the crowd from shouting their usual chants against the West. The inauguration also saw a pilgrimage of proxies who met with Supreme Leader Khamenei and his new president ahead of the ceremony. On Monday and Tuesday, Pezeshkian met with Hezbollah Deputy Sheikh Naim Qassem, Hamas Chief Ismail Haniyeh, Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Ziad al-Nakhala, and Houthi spokesperson Mohammed Abdul Salam. In the meetings, Pezeshkian emphasized, quote, supporting and defending the resistance front is a religious duty and one of the basic principles and policies of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The power of the resistance is becoming more evident every day. The Zionist enemy, with all the help from America and some treacherous governments, has failed to immobilize or overcome the resistance forces.
Pezeshkian told the Palestinian factions that supporting the Palestinian cause and its fighters does not change with the change of governments and will continue strongly.
Well, for more on that, let's bring in Jason Brodsky, Policy Director at the group United Against a Nuclear Iran. Great to see you, Jason. So basically today we've got an EU representative at the same gathering as all of Iran's proxies, including the leader of Hamas. Interesting.
Yes, Laura, I think it's quite sad. Let's not forget that Enrique Mora, who was a senior diplomat of the European External Action Service, was also the designated representative to attend Ibrahim Raisi, the butcher of Tehran's inauguration in 2021. And during that time, he was seated behind the leaders of EU-designated terrorist organizations. Fast forward to today, we see Enrique Mora in a class photo in the back, very close to, again, the same EU leaders of EU-designated terrorist organizations. So it raises really a lot of questions in my mind. The EU boycotted Putin's inauguration in Russia. Why couldn't it boycott the Islamic Republic's inauguration when it's launching terror attacks on EU soil and arming Russia against Ukraine?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, at the same time, Armenia, Tajikistan and Iraq all sent leaders. Very few other world leaders that were there today. What do you read into that?
Well, I think it just shows, on one hand, how isolated the Islamic Republic is. And on the other hand, you will also see the new president's priority of neighbors first. And this is a continuation in many respects of Ibrahim Raisi's priorities when he was president. And so that's it's symbolic of the Islamic Republic's priorities.
And meanwhile, Jason, you've got a piece out about Iran's ties to the anti-Israel protests that we saw on US campuses in recent months. At the same time, US intelligence saying that Tehran is using covert methods, using social media and other means to try and disrupt the former President Donald Trump's re-election campaign.
Yes, I think that the Islamic Republic has a very robust influence network. Had several nodes to it. First is the Foreign Ministry, which develops relationships with media outlets and think tanks in the West and the United States and Europe specifically to cultivate individuals who it feels are well placed to echo and telegraph its narrative in the West. That's a very significant concern. There has been blockbuster reporting by Iran International and Semaphore on this issue, and there has never been a real response from the U.S. government as to these allegations, and I think that's quite unfortunate. That's only one part. The other parts are interfering and influencing and stoking protests in the West, particularly through the Ministry of Intelligence and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' intelligence organization, and it does that physically and online. And so this is part of a robust network that has been in place for years, and we only hear from the U.S. intelligence community that it's warning and advising Americans about these activities, but we don't hear from the U.S. intelligence community and the U.S. policymakers as to what Washington is doing to combat these activities. And so we need to hear more from policymakers on all of these topics.
Jason Brodsky, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Sharifine Grossman's with me in the studio. Somewhat astonishing, isn't it, to see an EU official attending that ceremony in Tehran?
Well, like was just said, it's not very new or surprising. It's a shame, and it goes to speak to this moral compass that was lost in the West and EU in particular. Kind of this fetish of pluralism of thought and dialogue, and they took it one step too far. And you have to understand what's right, what's wrong, and stand up for it. And it's just, there's no place for you to be in a room with so many EU-designated organizations. I want to say about the demonstration in the U.S. and the involvement in Iran. In Israel, just a few weeks ago, there was published that Iran operatives have tried to, they offered money to an Israeli citizens to go and rave havoc, basically, and torn Israel apart from everything. And we're seeing the same thing happen in the U.S. And I won't be surprised. There's a lot going on in Israel these days with the arrest of some soldiers, and there's a lot of civil unrest. And I wouldn't be surprised if Iran also is there to kind of
stir up those divisions.
To stir up those division. And I think every citizen that is watching should be aware of entities trying to manipulate us.
All right, Sherry. For now, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the IDF has redeployed troops to several of its military bases following violent protests and yesterday's breach at the Stay Taiman base in the south. The two bases were overrun by right-wing protesters who were outraged by the detention of 9 IDF soldiers at the prison facility amid accusations that they seriously abused a Palestinian detainee. Our Nicole Zedek is at the Bet Lid military base and joins us now. So, Nicole, this was a major security breach last night, wasn't it? Is the situation back under control now?
Certainly seems to be the case that the situation is under control right now, but throughout the day they've been adding more and more security. In fact, behind me right now, you're going to take a look. I'm not sure if you can see all of the security forces, but it's actually this fence that they're working on, because this black metal fence is the exact area where some of these protesters were able to break in through just yesterday. So right now they're actually using a whale and a torch to reinforce this fencing area right now. And so this is the scene that we've been seeing throughout the day, them coming here and really trying to reinforce the area. It's not only this, but even some of the extra security personnel, as I mentioned, some of these metal barriers as well that the protesters have been slamming against throughout the day to try and get the attention of the police and security forces. However, that's really the extent of the clashes that we've seen today, because the security forces, they are on such high alert, and there's roughly about a dozen, maybe 24 protesters here. Many of them, some of them actually even have family members who have been detained, some of those 9 soldiers. And so they're out here waiting and continuing to voice their support, them stating that these soldiers have been wrongfully detained in their opinions.
And Nicole, what about the accused? When will they come before a judge? When will we see the case proceed?
That's really the question that many of these protesters are also out here waiting to hear. The military attorney's office, they've actually requested to extend the detention time until at least Sunday. This coming from the military attorney's office, so they have more time to really look into the case, while also requesting that the details of the case remain under confidentiality and aren't published to the public. However, many of the family members out here tonight, many of the friends, many of them just showing their support for the soldiers, are waiting here to see exactly if these detainees are arraigned, and that's really what they're waiting for, just to learn a little bit more information on the timeline.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much. Nicole Zedek there with Shufan Grossman's with me in the studio. And this is the, aside from the very serious accusations, this is the last thing that the IDF needs to deal with right now, isn't it?
The last thing, but I have to say, you know, this will not deter any of the IDF court judges or prosecutors to do their job in the interest of justice and legal obligations that we must keep. It's really splitting. There's a very small minority that is actually in the demonstration. Their majority of the Israeli public is quite shocked for what happened, and I think both sides, everybody's disappointed that no one in the leadership went out last night to calm things down. And even, I mean, we spoke on the Israeli news channel to one of the protesters that's saying that, you know, things really got out of hand last night, and they're not there again today to breach the gates. They just want to quit, to peacefully protest. I think things really got out of hand yesterday, and I hope we won't see this again.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, the UK has delayed making a decision on whether or not to discontinue arms sales to Israel. More in this report.
Well, let me make this absolutely clear. The UK is on the verge of making a decision that could reshape its foreign policy and impact the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Earlier this month, the new Labour government restored funding to UNRWA, which Israel accuses of providing a safe haven to terrorists, and withdrew its objection to the International Criminal Court's request for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Now, there are indications that an end to the sale of arms to Israel could be next. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been vocal about the need to reassess Israel's weapons use in Gaza.
What about British weapons sales to Israel?
Well, I said in coming into office that I would look at the assessment and the legal considerations. I will do that over the coming days. That process has begun, and I hope to report to Parliament as soon as I possibly can.
The UK leadership has been facing continuous pressure to end arms exports to Israel since the beginning of the war.
Stop arming Israel!
The previous Conservative government, led by Rishi Sunak, was a staunch supporter of Israel's right to defend itself. However, with a new administration in Downing Street, this policy is expected to change in the coming weeks. In the face of ongoing war, other countries like Canada and the Netherlands have already halted arms shipments to Israel, citing concerns over humanitarian law violations. But how significant are all these countries' decisions on the matter? Israel is a major weapons exporter itself, but its military has been heavily reliant on imported aircraft, guided bombs, and missiles. The United States, Germany, and Italy are by far the biggest suppliers of arms to Israel. While Washington continues to export billions of dollars worth of weapons, the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs remains withheld. President Joe Biden has said he doesn't want Israel to use such high payload bombs in densely populated areas.
No change to that policy at this time, and I would just add that that is the only shipment of the only type of weaponry that has been held up, that all the military security assistance that had been going to Israel continues to go to Israel. They are still getting the tools, the capabilities, and the weapons that they need for the fight that they're in.
Germany, the second biggest arms supplier to Israel, has faced two major lawsuits to revoke arms sales both domestically and at the International Court of Justice. Virtually winning both of them, Chancellor Olaf Scholz asserted he would continue arming Israel for its self-defense.
Das heißt, es bleibt weiter.
Can Israel count on getting further weapons from Germany?
We don't always have available what is being asked from us, but aside from that question, we have not taken another decision. We have not decided that we will not deliver weapons. So we will, and we did.
Italian law bans arms exports to countries that are waging war, yet the country has continued to export arms to Israel under orders signed prior to the beginning of the war on October 7th. For now, the UK government prepares to make its decision, and the international community watches closely to see what could mark a significant shift in the world's approach to Israel's war against Hamas.
Well, time for a very short break, but much more still to come. Stay with us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Welcome back. France has moved to recognise Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara region following Israel and the United States in a move that is likely to anger Algeria. Well, with more on that, we're joined in the studio by our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran. Ariel, what is the significance of this decision?
Well, first of all, we have to put it in context. This isn't a formal recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara, but it is an indication that France at least supports that or is willing to move in that direction. And this comes following in a letter sent by Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, to Moroccan King Mohammed VI, and celebrating the 25th year to his inauguration as king. And in the letter, basically, Macron saying that acknowledging Moroccan sovereignty over this disputed territory is the sole way to solve this ongoing crisis. Now, the significance about this is that it's a shift of a decades-long policy that France has had, not recognizing Morocco's sovereignty, and basically since the start of this dispute in 1975, acknowledging the Polisario Front, their claim to that territory. Now, in this shift, France aligns itself with countries like the United States and Israel that have supported this move. But I think deeper it shows a shift in, I think, policy or how France views Morocco moving forward. And it's in a time where France is seeing region after region in Africa losing its influence, losing its kind of sway, and seeing, given that France sees Morocco as one of the entries, one of the bridges to Africa, tightening relations with Morocco is indeed important. I will note that my understanding with conversations that I've had with Moroccans is that this gesture on behalf of Macron also comes for personal reasons, we can say, that for the past 2 years, Macron and King Mohammed VI haven't been in contact, and that's following, some will say, rumors of something that Macron said in a phone call to the Moroccan king. Following that, the two have not been in contact. This letter, even if, regardless of the personal element to it, does seem like an olive branch sent out from France to Morocco.
Quite a significant gesture to try and repair a friendship. All right, Ariel, thank you very much. Ariel Osseran. Shuri Grossman is with us from Dvoha. And Shuri, this is significant for Israel, isn't it? Because, of course, it's all linked to the Abraham Accords and the Normalization Accords with Morocco. Well, yeah, so in a way you're right, because it all started with the U.S. stance back in December 2020. And seems like a long time ago. I mean, we've been discussing Macron and the action he's been doing in various arenas, right? With the Israeli ban with the weapons. Weapon sales. Yeah, that was there. Euro Satori. Right, remember that? He's not really the most stable person to make policy decisions. So he might support Algeria in a few weeks or months. He's been known to be now. Yeah, he's been known to make unexpected moves like this. So we have to wait and see. This really is quite a step forward, and we know like Ariel said, the relationship between Morocco and France has been quite bad for the
last couple of years. So this is could maybe a significant means in that.
Yeah, I don't think ties between France and Algeria are going to mend anytime soon, because Algeria announced that it's withdrawing its ambassador from Paris.
Really?
And it's reducing its representation in response to this letter sent by Macron to the Moroccan king.
Okay, all right. Thank you both. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is enjoying a rapprochement with Arab states, and there are now calls for Europe to do the same. 8 EU member states, including Italy, Austria and Greece, are calling on the EU to rethink its strategy towards Damascus. But that call has been rejected by Germany, which accepted over 1 million Syrian refugees just under a decade ago. Well, for more on that, let's go to Brussels. We're joined by journalist Alex Cadier. Thanks for being with us, Alex. Why, first of all, do these EU countries want to normalise ties with Assad, a leader who has committed well-documented war crimes against his own people?
Well, there's certainly a domestic European political element to this that really is front and centre here. They say that having this EU-Syria envoy, as they described it, would increase political leverage in the region and the EU's humanitarian effectiveness. But read a little further, they also want to create 10 safe zones within Assad regime-controlled areas in Syria, which could be used to return Syrian refugees that are currently staying in Europe. And if you look at the countries behind this, Italy, Austria, certainly Cyprus, Greece, Slovenia, Slovakia, these are countries that are increasingly concerned about instability in the region and the migratory waves that could come as a result of that. So the domestic political concerns, particularly from Italy's and Austria's right-wing governments, is one of trying to reduce migration into the European Union and returning Syrian refugees to Syria. Pushback from Germany, saying that there is clear documentation of the Assad regime committing the worst human rights violations and crimes against its own people on a daily basis. And so long as that continues, Germany says we cannot consider normalization.
Quite. And Germany, of course, took the lion's share of refugees from Syria back in 2015. Who's likely to get their way in this dispute? The EU countries that you mentioned, or Germany?
I think predicting how EU decisions are made is always a bit of a risky business here in Brussels. But if Germany is clearly opposed to this move, and we know that France, for example, the other major power in the EU, still has an international arrest warrant out for Bashar al-Assad, which has only been upheld by France's High Court just a few weeks ago. If those two countries oppose normalization, the odds of it happening very, very slim indeed. So this could be seen as posturing by some right-wing governments within the European Union that they want to see more done on returning refugees and migrants to Syria. The idea of a wholesale EU-wide normalization without France, without Germany on board. We also haven't heard from countries like Belgium, like Ireland, who will be much stronger on that human rights piece than others. It seems unlikely at the moment, but still those 8 member states, those 8 countries making a statement they want to change the strategy. There may be a change of strategy. Normalization, as things stand, still seems unlikely.
All right, Alex Cadier in Brussels. Thank you. Sherifan Grossman's with me in the studio. So we've got Arab states embracing Assad. We've got reports that Turkey's President Erdogan is trying to repair ties with Assad, and now the Europeans as well. What does this mean for Israel? This is one of Israel's arch enemies, of course.
Yeah, well, legitimacy for Assad right now is not in Israel's best interest. I mean, look, there was a point in time where some of us in the Israeli establishment thought that it's better for the Arab state to embrace back Assad, returning to the Arab League, etc. But this was when there was still an opportunity for Assad to depart from Iran and Hezbollah. For what we've seen in the last year to couple of years is a real interdependency between Assad and Hezbollah, Syria and Lebanon. Kind of reminds us of a few years back. It's a traditional thing, and I don't think it's in the best interest, and I don't think it's in the best interest to Europe, because what those European countries did basically is give already Assad the legitimacy without getting refugees back. He will never take those refugees back because that what happened with the refugees really changed the demographics of Syria, and
we see a lot more Shia.
Exactly, a lot more Shia and less Sunnis that are opposed to the Assad regime. So he really got descendants to flee the country, and he
got to get rid of the population.
Exactly, he doesn't want. So there's no interest for him to take it back. He has an interest of a weaker Europe, and now while you're giving him legitimacy, that gives him kind of this card to maybe take some sanctions away. So you're really giving something already away without getting anything back. So, you have to know how to negotiate with these things.
All right. Shiri, thank you very much. Shiri van Grossman there. Well, representatives from Turkey and Armenia are meeting at their common border today for another round of talks on normalising ties. Ankara severed ties with Yerevan back in 1993 in support of Azerbaijan in the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan took over the disputed enclave last year and forced the entire ethnic Armenian population to flee. Well, let's go to Yerevan. We're joined now by correspondent Rafi Elliott, a political risk analyst. Thank you very much for being with us, Rafi. So just this weekend, we heard Turkey's President Erdogan boasting about what the Turkish army had managed to do in Karabakh, as he called it. Can Armenia really trust Turkey?
Thank you for having me on the show, first of all. Indeed, Erdogan's affirmation on the weekend was pretty telling. I think Armenians have been pretty vocal over the last 4 years about exposing Turkey's kinetic and military participation in the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war. I think there is also already a lot of ample evidence which has been corroborated by various intelligence sources across the European Union that Turkey directly participated, at least in the planning stage of the military offensive, but also contributed in the form of Syrian mercenaries, which had been flown into Azerbaijan in the weeks prior to the war, at least 2 of which have been captured by Armenian forces during the war. So Turkey's affirmation that they actually directly participated in the war is a new admission that Azerbaijan, of course, was very quick to deny. But to answer your question, can Armenia trust Turkey? No, there is absolutely no reason for Armenia to trust Turkey. But unfortunately, diplomacy is very rarely anyway built on a mutual trust.
Well, quite. Well, what is the upside then for Armenia in holding these meetings? I think this is the 5th round of talks. What do they get from it?
Correct. So these talks are interesting for a number of reasons. As you've mentioned, since Armenia hasn't had formal diplomatic relations with Turkey since 1993, which means that between 91 and 93, for a 2.5-year period, since Armenia gained independence from the Soviet Union, there was a brief period of talks between the two countries. And then since then, there have been conflicting reasons as to why these ties have been cut. So Armenia has been demanding that Turkey officially recognize the 1915 Armenian genocide in exchange for normalization of relations, whereas Turkey has insisted on Armenia evacuating all of Nagorno-Karabakh, including those parts of it that Armenian forces were agreed upon staying in the 1994 ceasefire agreement. So the fact that these talks are going on now is important because both sides have agreed multiple times that they were working towards normalization without precondition, meaning Armenia would drop the precondition of Turkey necessarily recognizing the genocide, whereas Turkey would drop the prerequisite of removing Armenian troops from Nagorno-Karabakh, especially since that point is now moot, because as of 2023, Azerbaijan has, as you eloquently put it, ethnically cleansed the entire region of Nagorno-Karabakh. So Turkey's refusal to normalize relations is quite confusing because the prerequisite itself no longer. Now, Turkey, of course, has been closely aligning its foreign policy towards Armenia with Azerbaijan, and therefore constantly moves the goalposts. So before it was evacuating Nagorno-Karabakh, now it is sign a peace with Azerbaijan on Azerbaijan's terms. And of course, Azerbaijan's terms are deliberately maximalist and impossible to follow. So these plans were never really meant to come to a peaceful agreement and a normalization of relations. But the fact that these talks have now resumed is important, because although there have been 5 such talks in the last 3 or so years, there haven't actually been talks in the last 2. The last time Armenian and Turkish representatives met was July 1st, 2022 in Vienna. So this is interesting because A, they're meeting, and B, they're meeting on the border, specifically at a checkpoint which is intended to be reopened.
All right, Rafi, thank you very much. Rafi Elliott there.
Thank you for having me.
Well, staying with Turkey, and a controversial new law is threatening to round up and kill hundreds of thousands of stray dogs. Animal activists have taken to the streets, but the government is adamant. Our Bianca Zanini has this report.
Freedom to humans, to animals, to earth. Angry demonstrators gathered to protest the government's plans to round up millions of stray dogs from the streets and put them in overcrowded shelters, or, if they're deemed aggressive, kill them.
What is happening? So do you want the cats and dogs on the street to be murdered? We are here so they are not murdered. We are here so this law doesn't pass.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party presented the plan to parliament earlier this month in an attempt to combat the problem of around 4 million stray dogs in the streets of Turkey. Stories of dogs gathering in large packs are scaring the population, and several people have been attacked. But animal rights activists and opposition lawmakers have dubbed it the massacre law, saying that is not the way to do it. Protests have been ongoing for the past days across the country.
We will not give you one single life of ours. Come, veto this law. No member of parliament should vote yes for this law. We will make sure all of those who support the law are on the wrong side of history.
The new law has received growing criticism from opposition parties, with some saying they will not obey. But local mayors who do not enforce it could be put in prison for 2 years.
The United Arab Emirates has awarded a lottery licence for the first time in what could mark a step towards the legalisation of gambling. A firm called The Game LLC will operate under the banner of the UAE Lottery. For more on that, let's go to Dubai and our correspondent Bastien Bory. Sebastian, is Dubai on the verge of becoming the Las Vegas of the Middle East?
Well, as of now, gambling is still banned in Islam and in all of the Gulf states. I mean, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman and Kuwait. But with these signals, yes, Abu Dhabi is currently sending these signals to the global gambling industry so that it could be potentially paving the way for gambling to be allowed. Even if the government denies rumors that it has already been granting gambling licenses in the past, some diplomats have said that the UAE could actually move to allow it sooner than expected, because just 3 or 4 years ago during COVID, the economy of this country had fallen by 6% with the global decline in the price of hydrocarbons and the downfall of services sectors, including tourism. So gambling would be an 18th way of diversifying an economy that still relies a lot on oil and gas. And it would be also a way for the UAE to attract and retain talents, encourage more businesses to set up shop as part of wider reforms aimed at maintaining their edge as a tourism and business hub, notably by pulling in billions of dollars of gaming revenue annually, and eventually get ahead of other places like Singapore, for instance.
So potentially some financial opportunities there. The new British government seems to spy some new opportunities in the Gulf countries as well. We've got a series of trade deals that could be signed. Tell us what's on the table.
Well, the British are trying to take advantage of the fact that, as we said, the Gulf economies still lack a kind of advanced economy through which they can get rid of oil and shift from consuming countries to producing countries. And to do so, they need their international partners, including the UK, who's trying to turn the page on the Brexit and appear once again as a global and cooperative country, including with Qatar, the Gulf, and India, especially via defense cooperation, the sale of weapons, submarines and combat aircraft, the construction of ports for military use, and so on and so forth.
Bastien Bory in Dubai, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, a rapper and a labourer are among dozens of candidates who have announced they're running for president of Tunisia when the country holds elections later this year. President Kais Saied has announced he will be seeking a second term. His critics accuse him of taking the country back to autocracy after the overthrow of the dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali back in 2011. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Elisa Pavia, Associate Director at the North Africa Programme at the Atlantic Council. Great to see you, Elisa. So elections are slated to go ahead in October. Can you tell us about some of these candidates?
Yes. So as you rightly mentioned, the elections are coming up. They are slated to be held on October 6th. And some of the candidates are out, and we know their names. And as you mentioned earlier, one of them is a known rapper. His name is K2 Rims, also known as Karim Garbi. He's an interesting figure because he used to be the son-in-law of former President Ben Ali. He was also very close to Ben Ali at the time. So that sparked a bit of controversy other than the fact that he is a well-known rapper. Other candidates include former National Security Advisor to the President, Kamil Akrut, and former Minister of Transport, Mohdeh Zainardi.
And can we expect these elections to be free and fair?
So the answer to that question would be no. President Kais Saied has been implementing an ongoing crackdown on all opposition figures, media, journalists, and the magistrate as well. He's made it increasingly difficult for anyone who wants to place their candidacy to do so. There are a number of hurdles that now each candidate must face in order to become a potential candidate to the presidency, but also, a number of very influential and famous opposition figures, including Issam Chebbi, including Rashid Ghannouchi and Abir Moussi, who are leaders of major opposition parties. They are all in jail facing corruption charges or charges of subverting the state. So it is quite clear that Kais Saied is doing everything in his power to try to secure a landslide victory come October 7.
And Elisa, when it comes to this political campaign, what will the candidates be laying out as their main priorities?
So as of now, the candidates, aside from the rapper K2 Rims, all candidates are focusing mostly on the economy and inflation and poverty rates. Tunisia still faces one of the highest poverty rates in North Africa. About 20% of Tunisians are considered to be below poverty rate. And the economy is in dire straits, has always struggled to take off after the Arab Springs in 2011. And so high inflation and high unemployment still marks the economic landscape in Tunisia. And so the candidates are mostly looking to tackle those issues. However, the rapper Garbi, he did make an interesting he made an interesting statement when he did decry the ongoing political crackdown in Tunisia. So, commentators are looking at him with curiosity to see if he actually could represent a real opposition figure to the current president, Kais Saied.
Yeah, it could be an interesting new step in this country's complicated path to democracy, couldn't it? Elisa, thank you very much indeed. Elisa Pavia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're getting some reports of loud explosions in Beirut. This, of course, as the world is braced for Israel to respond to attacks by Hezbollah. Our Zach Andrews is in the north of Israel. Zach, what do we know?
Yeah, not much at this point. We're still trying to locate this as well. Now, Beirut being as large of a city as it is, this explosion seems to be heard by quite a few people, so it does sound like it was a big one. We are thinking right now, based on some of the images, that this was potentially in one of the southern areas of the city. But again, this is all unconfirmed, and even myself, I'm looking at more and more of these images now. Yeah, this does appear to be a massive blast in one of the suburban areas, the urban area, not near the airport. I can say that just looking by these pictures here.
Could it be Dakhia, the Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut?
Yeah, my mind immediately went to that. This looks like a single strike as well. Oh boy, yeah, this is a massive strike on an apartment block. Certainly looks like this is the south of the city as well, one of those Hezbollah strongholds.
All right, but this will remind people of what happened early on in this conflict when the senior Hamas leader, Saleh al-Aruri, was taken out in a major blast in the Dakhia neighborhood of Beirut. But as you say, Zach, we don't know where exactly this explosion happened, but we can confirm that it was in the Lebanese capital. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe we can, just based on these images and the reports that we're seeing by some of the Lebanese reporters. My colleagues there are reporting this as well. I'll attribute this information to them. They are saying that this is in the south of the city. I should note, Laura, that within the last 30 minutes, actually, we're just now leaving Kiryat Shmona because the IDF asked us to. We just got an alarm there less than 15 minutes ago, and about 10 interceptions took place then. So it's been very heavy and active on this border as well at the same time as this attack, this apparent attack in Beirut.
All right. Well, thank you, Zach. We have been waiting for Israel to respond to Hezbollah's deadly attack on the Golan a few days ago, in which 12 Druze children were killed. Another Hezbollah attack claimed the life of an Israeli civilian today. We are looking at what might be an Israeli response to that in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. No confirmation as what we are looking at as yet. Do stay with us on I24 News. Kalev Ben David will keep you up to date on that and the rest of the news this hour. Stay with us.
Beloved region was 95% heaven before that fateful day. Then, in one piercing moment, horror and darkness took over our lives. But Jewish National Fund, USA, were here with us from day one, helping us to collect our pieces together. We choose life, and we will continue, always, to choose life together.
necesitamos realmente un cambio porque ya estamos bastante preocupados por nuestro país. Son 25 años de ese gobierno que ha llevado a nuestro país a la ruina, a la pobreza, tantos niños pasando hambre, tantas necesidades.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Welcome to the Rundown on I-24 News. I'm Khaled bin David, and we start the broadcast with breaking news out of Lebanon. Reports of a major explosion in a suburb of Beirut, possibly an Israeli airstrike. Of course, the backdrop to it, there you see pictures coming out of Beirut. The backdrop, of course, Saturday's rocket attack on Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights, Israel's Golan Heights, in which 12 children were killed. And a rocket attack by Hezbollah today that killed an Israeli civilian. A hard response to these attacks was promised by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This could be it. With me in studio, we have our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseron, and retired IDF Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, the former deputy head of assessment of Israeli military intelligence. What are we getting out of Lebanon about what this could be?
So I'll tell you what we know. What we know, a huge explosion rocked the southern Dahia suburb of Beirut, the capital in Lebanon. And there's images coming out of significant damage there. Now, the Dahia suburb, that's basically the headquarters, the stronghold of Hezbollah in Beirut. What we're hearing from reports in Arab media as well as in Reuters is that the target was a session of Hezbollah's top Shura Council. That's the deciding body of the terror organization. And the target was a senior commander in that in that council. His fate is unknown, but images coming out of downtown Beirut show quite a bit of devastation going on there. Also, additional reports citing Western diplomats saying that this is an Israeli strike, with all Arab media already attributing the strike to Israel. No official word yet from Israel. Also no announcement yet from Hezbollah regarding this strike.
Jacques, maybe a better explanation. If this Shura Council was the target of the strike, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid of this is sort of the council of Hezbollah, the place where discussions are taking place, where decisions are made concerning the policy of Hezbollah internally, externally. This is the place where the main responsible people there are very close to Hassan Nasrallah.
But would Nasrallah himself be there, or is that too open a space?
It could be. It could be. But I mean, certainly a cleric like Hashem Safeddin, who is a close relative of Nasrallah, might be there definitely. So we are talking about the top brass of Hezbollah being targeted. And now a small detail: the attack was in an area in a quarter called Har Tahrek. This is not exactly the Dakhya. Now, if we have to discuss the place where the Dakhya is concerning Har Tahrek is much on the east, and whereas the Dakhya is south of the Khaldi Airport, International Airport. So these are two different places. Har Tahrek is also the alma mater of Nabih Berri, so the chief of the Amal militia. So this is definitely a place that has a high intensive, let's say, impact on Hezbollah, and it's more hitting the sovereignty of Hezbollah rather than its military power.
In South Lebanon, and we are seeing those pictures. You see some major damage there. We saw that long shot there, but in the close-ups, you could see, obviously, major damage there in the streets of Beirut. And clearly, this was a very serious airstrike. And Jacques, what does it mean for Israel? Of course, we have to note Western powers, the U.S., European powers urging Israel to show restraint. Is this a restrained response, or is this one that could ignite and escalate this conflict? Certainly, striking Beirut is well outside of the parameters that Israel has set itself since the beginning of the war, which is mainly striking South Lebanon.
No, if we continue the logic and we assess the logic of Hezbollah, any strike deep inside Lebanon will be responded by a deep strike inside Israel. So we have to be prepared. Now, Hassan Nasrallah said it very plainly and very simply: an airport with an airport. It's a tick for tack. I mean, the policy. You hit me here, I will hit you there. And I believe that hitting Beirut as the capital of Lebanon, we might see a similar attack on the area of Tel Aviv. Certainly Haifa. I mean, we have to look beyond Haifa into an area that Hezbollah, it might, as you say, ignite the overall conflict between us and Hezbollah. This is definitely a turning point in the conflict and in the war with Hamas.
Ariel, I believe right before this, there was home front command warnings for whatever residents of Kiryat Shmona, which sit right on the border, for them to remain at home. But as Jacques is saying, the anticipation here could be a much deeper strike in Israel. So far, though, no word out of Israel, correct, or any change in, for example, home front command instructions.
Well, my understanding is that those instructions for the local communities in the north to stay in their shelters, that didn't come from the military, from the Home Front Command, but rather from the municipalities themselves, instructing the residents to stay in the quarters. Now, that would be an indication that perhaps they got word of this intended strike, because it coincided more or less the announcement to stay in shelter and the beginning of reports coming out from Beirut. But really, we're seeing...
Oh, wait, there is now... Dovret Tzahal has just put out a statement here saying that the IDF did make a targeted strike in Beirut, as you said, and it was on the commander responsible for the murder of children in Majd al-Shams and civilians, of course, over the many Israeli civilians. It says at this stage there's no change in the orders for Home Front Command, and the Army will update if there is. So there you go.
And this commander, my understanding, we still don't know his fate, but this targeted commander would be Fouad Shukr, also known as Haj Muhsen, considered one of the top advisors to Hezbollah, to Nasrallah, Hezbollah leader, and also one of the main elements to execute the different plans and manage the war machine for Hezbollah, whether it's acquiring
which
new
means
weapons.
Which means, in other words, that Hezbollah cannot ignore that. It's a real challenge to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah will respond.
All right, let's go to our correspondent on Zach Anders in northern Israel. I think we have him on the phone at this stage. Zach, are you with us?
Yes.
All right, so we do now have official confirmation from the IDF. This was basically a targeted a killing, but using clearly an airstrike of significant magnitude in Beirut. And of course, it comes on the heels of a civilian death, another civilian death up there in northern Israel today.
Yeah, and I would stress that the comments and the rhetoric that Hezbollah has been using today is important to note at this point, because they, through their proxies, telling Al Jazeera that they are prepared to retaliate and that they will retaliate against any Israeli aggression that took place today. With this strike in Beirut, we're going to pay very close attention to an already hot border. There's been 6 attacks today. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for the one you mentioned that killed that 30-year-old civilian, the man in Hashkarim. That's started fires that are still burning, Kalev, and we were in position covering those. And the reason why we're joining you on the phone is because there was a spat of incoming rockets. They said 10 incoming rockets right about the same time that this Beirut attack took place, or purported attack, I should say. Right about that same time, there was another Hezbollah launch. They all appeared to be intercepted, but at that point, some IDF soldiers who were with us that had communicated with the media unit had asked us that we need to move and move quick. So they pushed us out rather fast at that exact same time, and we started driving south, and we're still nearby, close enough to be able to see and hear interceptions, but Kiryat Shmona, when we were leaving, an absolute ghost town, and you could hear the interceptions and the outgoing artillery a lot louder today than I've experienced in many of my days up here.
All right. Now, apparently there were orders, stay-at-home orders given to whoever's left in Kiryat Shmona. As you say, it's mainly a ghost town, but concern about that. Clearly, the North especially has to be bracing for a response now. As I said earlier, Home Front Command has not issued any specific orders other than, as far as we know, other than that warning to Kiryat Shmona. But clearly, as you said now, anyone up there in the North, and including you, Zach, has to be at least certainly near shelter at this stage.
And I think what we should watch out for, Hezbollah has been, I struggle with the words. Patient isn't the right word, but directly after they've absorbed major hits or, Radwan force commander's been killed, it's not like we see them respond immediately. There's been a delay or some hesitation on their part, and that's been kind of why this conflict has been called in the past calculated. Now, the question going forward, especially for tonight, if this is a gloves-off moment, do they hit back hard? Do they hit back fast? Well, they certainly said that they would today. But if I think the Home Front Command rules that are being communicated for those communities in the evacuation zone, I think everybody in northern Israel should take that, whether or not they are listed in those zones, take those very seriously tonight and be near shelter, be prepared for any eventuality. We don't know when we're dealing with a terror group like Hezbollah what their mindset is and where they actually decide tonight to hit. They've felt like they're adhering to some rules of engagement and firing on northern border community towns, but we don't know how hard this hit them or how they're feeling tonight. And I think anybody in Israel should be paying very close attention to this near shelter.
All right. Zach Anders, we'll check in with you when we can, of course. Ariel, we're getting some reports out of Arabic media concerning some of the details we've been discussing of this airstrike in Beirut.
Yeah, the airstrike in Beirut on the Shura Council meeting of Hezbollah. This is the top decision-making body of the Iranian-backed proxy in Lebanon, and more reports are confirming what we had initially reported with caution, that indeed the target of the strike was Fouad Shukr, also known as Haj Muhsen, because they all have their civilian name and their Hezbollah name meaning their fighter name. If they were just a political organization, they wouldn't have. Nom de guerre. Yeah, exactly. So the understanding is that Shukr was the target. Not clear what his fate is, but more and more indications are that this was a successful strike. And indeed, I mean, Fouad Shukr, he's also wanted by the FBI. There's a $5 million reward for anyone who brings information as to his whereabouts. And so this illustrates the magnitude of a man like Shukar, who in Lebanon they're already saying that he was one of the closest things to the level of Imad Mounia, who was the military commander of Hezbollah. I think that's giving Shukar a little more credit than what he deserves, but indeed one of the closest military advisors to Nasrallah, and really one of the key elements in Hezbollah's war machine, again, whether it's acquiring weapons, contact with IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards of Iran, and really a key figure in everything that has to do with Hezbollah's military wing and their nefarious activities in the region, mainly against Israel.
Well, gentlemen, let's go back to northern Israel and speak with the reserve's IDF Major Elliot Chodov. He himself served in Northern Command there, and now a political military analyst. And Elliot, thanks for joining us. First of all, your reaction to this strike. Was this the strike that should have been taken by Israel in response to Majd al-Shams? Israel saying it was, and we've been discussing it, the Hezbollah commander who was even directly responsible for that strike there.
If this is all that Israel does, then I think it's inadequate. If it's the opening of a more extensive response, then I think it's an excellent way to start.
Right. Now, let me ask you, how do you assess, though, even though you're saying it's a good start, how do you assess how Hezbollah is going to respond just to this particular strike, even sometime, for example, this evening, if not later than that?
I think that we're going to see a significant Hezbollah response. This was not an appetizer, if you will, as a strike. This was starting with the main course and then moving up from there. So, the United States pressured Israel not to strike Beirut, not to strike the Dahia. I think in terms of the maneuvering, the dancing between the raindrops, it was an excellent opening move. First of all, it let the West and America know Beirut is not off limits. The Dahia is not off limits. And at the same time, as was mentioned earlier, went after somebody who was on the American list as well. It's going to be very difficult for America to condemn this as somehow as a rogue strike. But it's something that I think that Hezbollah will feel obligated to respond to. Now the big question is, how do they do it? In other words, will they stay in some sort of a frame that they've been, which is already too far? In other words, already striking at targets where there's a civilian population, or are they going to expand it? And I think we're now at the stage where, as I said earlier, if it's all that Israel does, then we're waiting for a Hezbollah response and see if it spirals. If this is the opening move of a night-long series of operations, then, as I've repeated many times, that there's an old saying, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. I'm going to say no analysis does either.
Right. Obviously, we'll have to readjust our analysis as these events go. But let me just ask you, since we are discussing the possibility of Hezbollah expanding its range of attacks, maybe now striking urban centers in Israel, south of northern Israel, places like Haifa, even here in Tel Aviv, a Home Front Command so far says no change. And we know they had issued stay-at-home orders at Kiryat Shmona, whoever's left there, just in the minutes before the attack. But should the Home Front Command, especially there in the north, be telling the residents, to all the residents in the north, to perhaps stay at home, stay near a shelter at this stage?
Look, Home Front Command operates according to military intelligence. I presume that if there's any indicator of some sort of massive response, and typically you have some of that, then Home Front Command will change it. What's interesting is that a lot of the local municipalities, Tzfat, for example, some of the local regional councils, have emphasized that Home Front Command has not changed its instructions. However, and in Meron Galil, for example, the regional council has said to the people who are still in the evacuated towns and kibbutzim, and there are people there, that they should go into safe rooms and stay there, and in the other towns to stay nearby, not to gather, not to wander, and so on and so forth. So there is a sort of undercurrent of that. I can't say whether that's a behind-the-scenes hint from Home Front Command or not, but obviously a lot of people are coming to the same conclusion that you are, and I've come to it as well. This is not a good night to be sort of wandering around far from safe rooms.
Absolutely not. Elliot, if you can, stay with us for a little more. I just want to go to the other guests. Jacques, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, just put out a tweet. The entirety of this was one short sentence simply saying Hezbollah crossed the red line. What is the message you were advisor to the late Yitzhak Rabin? So, Defense Minister Gallant putting out that just one sentence. What is his real message here now?
Well, you know, as your interview said earlier, this might be the appetizer. This is definitely the appetizer, because this is not the response that Israel should respond to what happened to Hezbollah crossing the red line on the Golan and killing the 12 children playing on a soccer field. One should stress the fact that this attack was carried out most probably by an attack drone, and not by the Israeli Air Force, which is again a sort of behavior that might limit the reaction of Hezbollah, but definitely hitting the number 2 man in the military establishment of Hezbollah doesn't. It means that Hezbollah has to answer. Now, how does this answer be? It could be, volleys of missiles against Israeli towns, maybe hitting as far as Tel Aviv. This could be one possibility, and the other thing that would be try to change the equation of the rules of engagement between us and Hezbollah. Till now, the Hezbollah has conducted a war of attrition against Israel. But Hassan Nasrallah, in his last speech, just alluded to the fact that the Hezbollah might initiate attacks on Israeli soil by Radwan units. So we have to be prepared that this might be a possibility that Hezbollah might initiate. And if this is so, we are in the beginning. We are at the beginning of a process that we don't know where.
But let's call it what it could be, which is the Third Lebanon War. This could end up being the Third Lebanon War. Exactly.
So we could be there if Hezbollah answers according to the principle that he has always conducted against Israel.
Right. I just, by the way, the name of we mentioned before, a civilian had been killed in Kibbutz Agoshrim, in what's called the Finger of the Galilee. His name has been released. I think near Popko, if I'm reading it correctly. 28 years old, civilian killed today by a Hezbollah rocket. May his memory be a blessing. Elliot, if you are still with us, Elliot Chodoff, are you still with us? No? Okay. We are seeing some, Ariel, we're seeing some photos here. Ariel? Mm-hmm. Photos here.
Yeah, that's Haj Muhsen Fuad Shuker.
This was the target, as far as we know, of the IDF strike.
And Lebanese media is saying that he was indeed eliminated in the strike. No official confirmation from either Hezbollah or Israel, but it's indeed a significant first indication. And yes, again, wanted not only in Israel but also by the U.S. Haj Muhsen really. Believed to be one of the key facilitators, not only of managing Hezbollah's war machine in southern Lebanon, but also in connection with Iranian officials, IRGC. Obviously, we should expect to see in the coming hours, as customary, a picture of Haj Muhsen with Qasem Soleimani, the former head of the IRGC's Quds force, because every senior commander that Israel eliminates,
we showed him the road to Jerusalem.
The road to Jerusalem. Yeah, it will be interesting to see if he's touted in Hezbollah's in their announcements of fallen in their obituaries as a commander. Right. Only 3 have been named that level so far, or a regular fighter. I imagine he will be the 4th commander to be announced killed by Hezbollah. Indeed, if he was eliminated, this would be a severe blow to the terror group.
Let me go back to Elliot Chodoff. You're still with us, Elliot. Yes. You and Jacques Neria seem to be in agreement that this could be just the opening shot for the IDF So what could we expect next? What would be the next logical stage for the IDF to take following this targeted killing in Beirut?
The next logical step, first of all, would be more extensive strikes, both air, artillery. As Jacques said, this was most likely a drone, although it could very well have been a manned aircraft with standoff weapons.
Right. I do want to interject. There are some reports, and I'm not sure the attribution, that do say that these were Israeli warplanes that carried out, but I don't have an official IDF confirmation on that. This may be based on reports coming out of from Beirut itself.
Right. Well, first of all, there could have been warplanes and a drone actually making the strike. In other words, there are many permutations of how this could have gone. I also saw an unconfirmed report that there was a strike at Beirut airport, but unconfirmed. I'm throwing out there right now. Real-time information is going to be very sketchy under the best of circumstances. But if this is just the opening move, I think we're going to see much more extensive strikes at Hezbollah targets all through Lebanon. This was kind of the opening of, and I think Defense Minister Gallant's tweet, "They crossed all the red lines," period, is just the kind of hint to say we've only just begun. And beyond that, as I said before, it's hard to judge. If they make the move that Nasrallah threatened, that Jacques mentioned earlier, and there's an actual ground attack by forces of Red One, successful or not, in other words, God forbid, not on October 7th repeat, but even if they launch an attack that's stopped, then I think we're likely to start to see Israeli ground movement into Lebanon, whether that will be limited or full scale. Here, I'll say I'm familiar with a lot of the plans, but the orders have to come down and say, this is what you're actually doing.
Right. Gentlemen, I'm just looking at a wanted poster that was released by the U.S. for Fouad Shukor, in which the U.S. is offering $5 million for information for him. But I think this is important to point out that this poster says that he did play a key role in the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Marine Corps barracks in Beirut, which killed 241 U.S. service personnel. And I would imagine in any conversation, Prime Minister Netanyahu, they just released a photo of him talking into looks like some kind of red phone, that he has with Washington. He would say, listen, this is the man who was responsible in part for the death of over 241 U.S. service people.
Yeah. Hezbollah, by the way, said the assassination attempt failed, that they did not manage to eliminate a senior commander. That's what Hezbollah is saying right now, not an official statement, but this is what they're saying right now.
All right, we don't know.
We don't know. We'll see.
But my point being that this target perhaps, in a sense, was picked, and you're right, the U.S. has been pressuring Israel not to escalate. This could be one of the talking points for example, Prime Minister Netanyahu.
This guy was the second in command of Ahmad Mounir, so he was, he was up to his throat, immersed in this terrorist activities against the French, against the international force at the time in 1982, and against the Israeli headquarters in Tyre twice. In November '83 and November '82, these are the two famous attacks that brought us, more than 70 people killed in a building in the headquarters that were at the time in South Lebanon. So it took some time in order to eliminate this guy. But if he's eliminated anyway, the ball is in their camp, not in Israel.
Jacques Narrier, Ariel Osran, stay with us. Elliot Chodov, thank you for joining us. We are going out for a brief break, but stay with us on this breaking news edition.
Our beloved region was 95% heaven before that fateful day. Then, in one piercing moment, horror and darkness took over our lives. But Jewish National Fund, USA, were here with us from day one, helping us to collect our pieces together. We choose life, and we will continue, always, to choose life together.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Necesitamos realmente un cambio porque ya estamos bastante preocupados por nuestro país. Son 25 años de ese gobierno que ha llevado a nuestro país a la ruina, a la pobreza, tantos niños pasando hambre, tantas necesidades.
Special breaking news edition on I-24 News. I'm Khaled Ben David. A major airstrike in Beirut, or a suburb of Beirut, carried out by the IDF this evening. The target was Fuad Shukr, one of the top commanders of Hezbollah. A figure, one of those figures, or maybe the figure responsible for the rocket attacks hitting northern Israel from South Lebanon, including the one that killed 12 children over the weekend in the Druze town in the Golan of Majd al-Shams, and killed an Israeli civilian today as well. Initially, Lebanese media had reported that Fuad Shukr had been killed in that airstrike in Beirut. Hezbollah, just in the past few minutes, releasing their own statement saying he did survive that strike. But based on what we've seen, it's likely there are certainly injuries and casualties, more than one in that strike. Now, the backdrop of this comes as several world leaders and officials had been pressuring Israel not to take a move that could possibly escalate the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, and Israel and Lebanon as well. Clearly, Israel, the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, took its own decision this evening. But let's take a listen to some of the comments that were made earlier today by some of these international leaders, cautioning Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah against taking any steps that could escalate a conflict.
I believe that you asked whether or not a fight was between Israel and Lebanon, or Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah, is inevitable, or imminent, excuse me. I don't believe that, while we've seen a lot of activity on Israel's northern border, we remain concerned about the potential of this escalating into a full-blown fight. And I don't believe that a fight is inevitable. I think that we'd like to see things resolved in a diplomatic fashion.
Very, very concerned about what is happening in Lebanon because of the risk of a regional escalation, just as it seemed that there might be some glimmer of hope. And this is also an element that must be evaluated. Every time we seem to be a little closer to the hypothesis of a ceasefire, something happens. It means that there are several, let's say, regional players who aim for an escalation and who, we say, always aim to force Israel to react. I say this also to invite Israel not to fall into this trap.
The situation on the de facto border between Lebanon and Israel is very concerning. We urge all parties to act with caution. The UK condemns the strike in the Golan Heights that has tragically claimed the lives of 12 people. Hezbollah must cease their attacks and their destabilizing activity.
Well, I stress those comments were made earlier today prior to this Israeli airstrike in Beirut. And I have to say a diplomatic solution to these tensions seems pretty far away this evening. Let's go back to our correspondent, Zach Anders, who is in northern Israel. And Zach, give us a sense, this tension there must be going to be a very tense, long night for the residents of northern Israel. And possibly for residents of Israel well south of there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been monitoring the border activity. The last attacks that have jumped now up to 11 that Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for. But the last attacks came in at 6:20 and 6:35, and it does appear that those barrages were intercepted. Hezbollah says that they were targeting military sites in those two attacks. It appears that those two attacks came before this alleged strike in Beirut, so we have not seen any recorded activity after this Beirut explosion. It has been throughout the day very active. Of course, as you'd mentioned, this event with another rocket attack killing a 30-year-old man, a civilian, here in the Galilee, rather. But since then, these attacks have largely been appearing to target military sites. That was the sixth attack of the day that Hezbollah had said they carried out, the one that killed that man in his 30s and started a large fire. The attacks after that appear, as Hezbollah's own statements, to be targeting military sites along the border itself. They say that they've been targeting air defense systems and that they've achieved direct hits. Of course, we don't have any confirmation. Nobody within the IDF is telling us that there has been any damage throughout the afternoon since these latest attacks. But again, it appears that the last attacks that have been carried out by Hezbollah, or been recorded at least, came before what happened in Beirut. So since this Beirut explosion, we have not seen any recorded activity. That's not to say there hasn't been, but none that has made its way to us just yet. So we're paying very close attention to this. Obviously, another very tense night here.
Right, but again, no specific instructions, a change in instructions from the Home Front Command, except, I believe, just for that one city of Kiryat Shmona right on the border, not far from where today's attack was on Kibbutz HaGoshrim. But you have to imagine anybody who's living anywhere in the vicinity of the north has got to be staying close to home and close to a safe room or shelter this evening.
Absolutely, and watching the sky as well, with the number of rockets that have already came across the border today and caused, we were in Kiryat Shmona for the entire afternoon, and it was constant booms echoing throughout the valley. A lot of that was outgoing artillery from the IDF, and then the interceptions that were taking place during the rocket attacks. Very loud there this afternoon before this explosion in Beirut. And you're right, it's interesting to note that there's no changes to the Home Front Command outside of those living right there on the border in Kiryat Shmona, but still, you would have to imagine that, well, this could go obviously either way. Some of on the Israeli side that I've spoken to have a feeling or a sense that Hezbollah knows that they messed up, that they shouldn't have hit Majd al-Shams, and that killing those 12 children was a grave mistake on their part, and that they will absorb this blow and not choose to escalate further. And then you speak to some others, especially to one of my friends in Beirut. They're very concerned tonight that Hezbollah has got its own, or has got itself in some sort of headspace right now where they think, you know what, now's the time, and they're going to start hitting back hard as well. People that I've spoken to in Beirut that haven't been able to leave, very, very scared, and since this explosion, really, really concerned that whatever comes next, they might not be prepared for it, given the shelters and the orders that their own embassies, the American embassy and the British embassy, telling people, get out now if you can, but it looks like that window's already closed.
All right, certainly have reason to be concerned, certainly in Beirut and certainly here in Israel as well. Zach Anders, thank you for that. We'll keep you posted, keep us posted on anything happening in the north. Ariel, some more reports coming out of Arabic media on what may have occurred there.
Right. So according to Saudi Al Arabiya, citing sources saying that the attack indeed targeted Fuad Shukr, but that the airstrike was, it failed that he was not eliminated. Hezbollah has reportedly begun closing off the roads leading to the targeted area. And
there was a report on Sky News of at least 2 people killed.
At least 2 people killed.
But not for Shakir.
One of them was a woman. They weren't identified.
They weren't identified.
But we are already coinciding with these reports that indicate that perhaps this was an unsuccessful elimination attempt. The Lebanon's national news agency, they're giving more details confirming that this was indeed a drone that launched 3 missiles at the target. The target, obviously, the meeting of the Shura Council, but we may not get official confirmation regarding the condition of Haj Muhsen Fouad Shukr for days. I'll remind you, we're still waiting on official confirmation regarding the elimination of Mohammed Def,
yes,
the head of the commander of Hamas's military wing, in an airstrike in Khan Yunis. That was over 2 weeks ago, and we still haven't received official confirmation as to that. I think it would be in the interest of Hezbollah to keep a veil of uncertainty, of secrecy regarding this, and that indicates why they decided to block the roads leading to the site. And of course, pending the result of this strike, if Shukr was not eliminated, obviously that would put Hezbollah in a different situation in terms of responding to Israel. However, the striking in Beirut, it's not the first time it happened in the war. Israel eliminated Hamas number 2, Saleh el-Arouri, in a drone strike in Beirut.
In the same place.
In the same area. Back then, Hezbollah's response was limited. If this was a successful elimination, I would imagine we will see a severe response. If it was unsuccessful, it won't mean that we'll see the same response that we would have seen if it were successful.
Well, let me ask you, Jacques, is that it? Does it make a difference if Fouad Shukr was killed or not in terms of the Hezbollah response?
Indeed. I mean, and then you have the Israeli declaration that we are done. Meaning that if Hezbollah is accepting the fact, then there's no need for another round between us and Hezbollah concerning the attempt to kill this Shukr. Anyway, I mean, the fact that Israel has used a drone like it did against Saleh el-Arouri means that the intention was not to hit a heavy populated, densely populated area, and because of that, and because the target was very limited, it is a message to Hezbollah not to widen the scope of the conflict between us and Hezbollah. It might respond with salvos of missiles, but I think that the earlier assumption or the earlier assessment that Hezbollah would hit Tel Aviv or Haifa, I think that this was to go too much.
Let me ask you, Jacques, the Prime Minister's office did release a photo of Prime Minister Netanyahu sitting with some top officials, with his cabinet secretary, Tzachi Bravman. There you have it. You see his military secretary. You see Tzachi Hanegbi, the head of the Security Council. There's an IDF official.
We have a copy of this photo with Obama sitting with the...
In a way, though, that did eliminate its target. Yeah. Obviously, some military intelligence figure, perhaps, whose face is blacked out here. But let's talk about whether you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu maybe did give any kind of warning, for example, to the United States, that it was taking this kind of attempt at a targeted assassination at a figure who was wanted by the U.S., who was responsible in part, certainly, for that bombing of the in Beirut that killed 241 American servicemen. Is that something you think that that Prime Minister Netanyahu would have discussed beforehand with the Americans, at least?
Discussed? No. Announced? Yes. When? Few minutes before the attack. This is the way it worked, because otherwise the Americans would have tried to stop him. And they don't want Israel to be involved in an attack in Beirut. So the fact that we did that, it was beyond the American position, and in a way to express to the Americans that we have our own decision-making process and we are independent in our decisions. And this is why, I mean, the same strategy was adopted at the time with Salah Harouri. It's the same drone attack. It's the same weapons that have been used. It's the same area that has been targeted, and there's nothing new. Now, of course, the fact that the Prime Minister has published these photos, it was under the impression that the attack was a success. But now, since it appears that he might be still living, or the attacker would have been a failure, then I think that this photo op should be put aside.
All right. And the question, Ariel, is, of course, Hezbollah is, as we've stressed so many times at the station, an Iranian proxy, funded by Iran, sponsored on by Iran. This comes on an interesting day in terms of Iran itself, yep. And one has to wonder, Iran has other ways of striking at Israel, even not directly through Hezbollah, through its other proxies. And we've seen those proxies work in coordination, certainly since October 7th.
And at least 4 of them met with Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei today during his inauguration. Look, at first when we heard of the strike and we heard of a senior official in Hezbollah that was targeted, we were like, okay, maybe was this Naim Qassem, the number 2 of Hezbollah? But no, he's in Tehran exactly for what you're describing. Hezbollah is one of Iran's proxies, but perhaps its most powerful one. Some could say that it's even the most powerful not official military in, if not the Middle East, in the world. And that's why targeting such an official like Fouad Shukr would be so important. But at the end of the day, we're seeing Hezbollah, yes, it is one of Iran's proxies, but has many, most of its interests, you could say, are Lebanese based. It's really torn between that Iranian influence and the Lebanese base. Many in Lebanon are accusing Hezbollah of being an alien element, Shia Iranian element in Lebanon that doesn't belong there. You can see it just by the clerics that they don't dress as usual standard Lebanese Muslim clerics. They adopt the more Iranian kind of Iraqi model of clothing, but that's just one example. But if we're looking today on a day like this, with you have the proxies meeting in Tehran and you have a suspected Israeli airstrike in Beirut.
Well, it's not suspected. The IDF has claimed credit for it now. So
I meant elimination. You're right. The IDF did confirm. This would be just simply face value would be crossing a red line that Nasrallah put. However, Israel, as I mentioned already, did cross that red line by eliminating Saleh al-Arouri, again, in the same area in Beirut. So we have to take what warnings Israel receives from Hezbollah at face value. But if we're looking at the overarching theme of Iran, where they play into this, Pezeshkian in his meeting with Naim Qassem, as well as the other senior officials, the leaders of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as the Houthi spokesperson, said that supporting the resistance front is religious law for the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I think that answers all the questions regarding their dedication.
Israel has been trying since the beginning to change the rules of engagement. And the fact that, I mean, you just mentioned that our defense minister just published this.
Which is why I want to ask you, Jack, could you really think Israel can go back, and even Hezbollah can go back to the old rules of engagement in which basically airstrikes are limited to northern Israel up to a certain point in northern Israel and up to a certain point in South Lebanon?
I will tell you as an Israeli, if this is what Israel has to prove in Beirut, then we have a real problem. we have a real problem. And this prime minister would have a real problem with this Israeli public, because the Israeli public expects much more than that. As your interviewer earlier said, it's an appetizer. For us, it's an appetizer. And if this appetizer doesn't come with a real meal, then I think that the onus would be on this government, and this government would even show its face to the public, because this would be a real disaster. Because and of course, failing to kill this terrorist would mean for Hezbollah that they have prevailed, and now this is they will strike and will say this is in response to what Israel did. They have all the legitimacy to do so, and this is where we are right now. And this is always too early to chant victory. Always too early. Just wait and see.
Never say mission accomplished before it is. But let's talk, Ari, a little more in detail about Fort Shukr and where he was. I believe we do even have a graphic on that in the sort of hierarchy of Hezbollah. Alive or dead, as you might say.
Right, so this is a graphic, excellent graphic in my opinion, thanks to the Alma Research and Education Center. Basically, following the elimination of Imad Mughniyeh, the military commander of Hezbollah in 2008, Nasrallah didn't really appoint a successor to Mughniyeh, and he kept this divide and conquer kind of MO by distributing Mughniyeh's responsibilities among a wide range of people. So second to the right is Fuad Shukr. We have the main commander of Hezbollah forces in the south, Haj Abul Fadl or Ali Karki. He's third to the left. There's no updated picture of his, but during this war, Israel had reportedly attempted to eliminate Karki, failed in an airstrike. If we're looking at perhaps the closest thing to a successor to Imad Mughniyeh, I would point out two people on this graphic who are not Fuad Shukr. I'm talking about Ibrahim Akil. He's third to the right. He is considered the de facto military commander and former head of Hezbollah's operations unit. And Talal Khamia. He's all the way on the left, head of the Unit 910 that's operating Palestinian attacks outside of Lebanese territory on Israel. Throughout the years, Khamia, Akil, and Fuad Shukr, those really have been the top three, you could say commanders, not field commanders, but really in the in-between of Nasrallah, the political leadership, and Ali Karki, the military leadership in the south. So you had these three, among others, main characters. So Fuad Shukr indeed was one of them, a key element in Hezbollah's ability to manage its, for lack of a better term, standing army, because that's pretty much what Hezbollah has in southern Lebanon. And I think if we're looking at statements this evening, UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force, saying that they're in contact with both sides, calling for de-escalation. I think the UN should look itself in the mirror and answer why for the past 18 years they have not demanded the implementation of UN Resolution 1701 following the previous war between Israel and Hezbollah. That resolution, we keep on returning to this, forbids the presence of any Hezbollah military personnel or weapons south of the Litani River. Now, when everyone's saying we need a diplomatic solution for this, UN resolutions are the diplomatic solution. But if they're not upheld, and if they don't mean anything,
it's a meaningless piece of paper.
Exactly, and that is what has, in my opinion, the residents of the north of northern Israel most concerned, because once the war in Gaza is done, just like Nasrallah said, Hezbollah will stop firing, and as far as they're concerned, they're okay with it. The question is, can Israel, in a post-October 7th reality, bring back its citizens to a place where you have a deadly genocidal terror organization on the other side of the fence, just waiting for the right opportunity? That is the question that Israel needs to ask itself, and that is the answer it needs to give when people present the diplomatic solution as the only holy solution for this unholy conflict.
Right now, I'm just going to note Al Mayadeen, which is a station linked with Hezbollah. They are reporting 10 injured in this evening's IDF airstrike.
Al Jazeera reporting 6 killed.
And six killed. So Reuters is being cautious and saying that the fate of
unknown
of Shukra is unknown. But clearly, we do have injured and likely fatalities, Jacques. So it's at this stage, even if Shukra is not killed.
2 days ago, Israel declared that we know who is responsible of targeting the Majd al-Shams soccer ball area. And it was a guy called Ali Muhammad Yahya. And now it comes another name, the Muhammad Fuad Shukr.
But he's responsible.
Who is the responsible? Now he's responsible of the responsible.
Okay. We are getting some reports now citing Lebanese military sources, not Hezbollah, but Lebanese military sources, report in Arab media saying that Shukr was not killed in this strike. If that is the case, Jacques, how does that stand for Israel and the IDF and the government if it took the strike in Beirut? Might have killed some significant figures, let's be clear, but if the main target was not taken out of the strike.
If the main target has not been hit and the attack finally is a failure, then I think that Israel must rethink its policy and its tactics concerning Hezbollah and try to divert to another option. Because, I mean, this is not the end of it. This cannot be the end of it because this is not the end of the conflict. It will not end Hezbollah firing on Israeli localities. It will not force Hezbollah to withdraw to the Litani. It will not force Israel to accept the actual boundary between Lebanon and Israel. We are at the same square number one. That's it from the very beginning.
Right. Unfortunately, that would be unfortunate. Gentlemen, we are going out on this broadcast. Just to recap, IDF did confirm it carried out an airstrike in a Beirut suburb. The target was Fuad Shukr, a top Hezbollah commander, one of the several number twos, apparently, to Hassan Nasrallah, a figure responsible for the rocket fire in northern Israel, such as that killed the 12 children in Majd al-Shams and one Israeli civilian today, also involved in the bombing in Beirut that killed 241 Americans. There are conflicting reports of whether, yes.
Yes, there are increasing reports that this was an unsuccessful attempt. This is mainly Saudi channels Al Hadaf and Al Arabiya saying that he was not eliminated and that Fuad Shukr managed to leave the building just before it was targeted.
All right, final word to our viewers here in Israel. In the north, certainly you should be staying close to home and close to a safe room and shelter. And that might be good advice even for people here in the center of Israel as well. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News.